Hi, and welcome to Sleep Cove, the podcast to get a great night's sleep, and also the largest sleep podcast in the world. Hi, I'm Christopher Fitton, and tonight I'll be reading out some Norse Viking myths for you. I'm continuing reading the Children of Odin book, and tonight you'll firstly hear about Loki and his confrontation with the rest of the gods in Asgard. Then I'll be reading the story of Brynhild, the battle maiden, the Valkyrie. The story begins describing Valhalla, then goes on to describe her adventures in Midgard. I really hope you enjoy these Norse myths. In the description, I'll leave a link to the Spotify playlist that has all these stories in a chronological order. This story is also available on the Sleep Cove Bedtime Story YouTube channel without music. I'll leave the link in the description there too, but please search for YouTube for Sleep Cove to see our two channels on there. There's one channel just for bedtime stories and another for meditation and hypnosis, so please subscribe to both if you like that kind of content. This version has relaxing music in the background. If you would prefer a version with no music, I'll leave the link in the top pinned comment and description. Thank you, and let's begin. Loki against the Aesir. The Aesir were the guests of the Vanir. In Frey's palace, the dwellers in Asgard met and feasted in friendship. Odin and Tyr were there, Vidar and Vali, Njord, Frey, Heimdall and Bragi. The Asinir and the Vala were also there, Frigga, Freya, Iduna, Gerda, Skadi, Sif and Nanna. Thor and Loki were not at the feast, for they had left Asgard together. In Frey's palace, the vessels were of shining gold. They made light for the table, and they moved on their own accord to serve those who were feasting. All was peace and friendship there, until Loki entered the feast hall. Frey, smiling a welcome, showed a bench to Loki. It was beside Bragi's and next to Freya's. Loki did not take the place. Instead, he shouted out, "Not beside Bragi will I sit, not beside Bragi, the most craven of all the dwellers in Asgard." Bragi sprang up at that affront, but his wife, the mild Iduna, quieted his anger. Freya turned to Loki and reproved him for speaking injurious words at a feast. "Freya," said Loki, "why were you not so mild when Adur was with you? Would it not have been well to have been wifely with your husband instead of breaking faith with him for the sake of a necklace that you craved at the giant woman?" Amazement fell on all at the bitterness that was in Loki's words and looks. Tyr and Njord stood up from their seats, but then the voice of Odin was heard, and all was still for the words of the All-Father. "Take the place beside Vidar, my silent son, O Loki," said Odin, "and let thy tongue, which drips bitterness, be silent." All the Aesir and the Vanir listen to thy words, O Odin, as if thou wert always wise and just, Loki said. But must we forget that thou didst bring war into the world when thou didst fling thy spear at the envoys of the Vanir? And didst thou not permit me to work craftily on the one who built the wall around Asgard for a price? Thou dost speak, O Odin, and all the Aesir and the Vanir listen to thee. But it was not thou who, thinking not of wisdom, but of gold, when a ransom had to be made, brought the witch Gulvig out of the cave where she stayed with the dwarf's treasure. Thou wert not always wise, nor always just, O Odin, and we at the table here need not listen to thee as if always thou wert. Then Skadi, the wife of Njord, flung words at Loki. She spoke with all the fierceness of her giant blood. Why should we not rise up and chase from the hall this chattering crow? She said. Skadi, said Loki, remember that the ransom for thy father's death has not yet been paid. Thou wert glad to snatch a husband instead of it. Remember who it was that killed thy giant father. It was I, Loki, and no ransom have I paid thee for it, although thou hast come amongst us in Asgard. Then Loki fixed his eyes on Frey, the giver of the feast, and all knew that with bitter words he was about to assail him. But Tyr, the brave swordsman, rose up and said, Not against Frey mayst thou speak, O Loki. Frey is generous. He is the one amongst us who spares the vanquished and frees the captive. Cease speaking, Tyr, said Loki. Thou mayest not always have a hand to hold that sword of thine. Remember this saying of mine in days to come. Frey, he said, because thou art the giver of the feast, they think I will not speak the truth about thee. But I am not to be bribed by a feast. Didn't thy not send Skirnir to Gymer's dwelling to befool Gymer's flightly daughter? Didst thou not bribe him into frightening her into a marriage with thee, who men say wert the slayer of her brother? Yea, Frey, thou didst part with the charge, with the magic sword that thou shouldest have kept for the battle. Thou hast cause to grieve when thou didst meet Beri by the lake. When he said this, all who were there of the Vanir rose up, their faces threatening Loki. Sit still, ye Vanir, Loki rallied. If the Aesir are to bear the brunt of Jotunheim and Muspelheim's war upon Asgard, it was your part to be the first or the last on Vingard's plain. But already ye have lost the battle for Asgard, for the weapon that was put into Frey's hand he bartered for Gerda the giantess. Her Surtur shall triumph over you because of Frey's bewitchment. In horror they looked at the one who could let his hatred speak of Surtur's triumph. All would have laid hands on Loki. Only Odin's voice rang out. Then another appeared at the entrance of the feasting hall. It was Thor, with his hammer upon his shoulder, his gloves of iron on his hands, and his belt of prowess around him. He stood, marking Loki with wrathful eyes. "Ha, Loki betrayer," he shouted. "Thou didst plan to leave me dead in Geroid's house, but now thy wilt meet death by the stroke of this hammer." His hands were raised to hurl Mjolnir, but the words that Odin spoke were heard. "Not in this hall may slaying be done, son Thor. Keep thy hands upon thy hammer." Then, shrinking from the wrath in the eyes of Thor, Loki passed out the feast hall. He went beyond the walls of Asgard and crossed Bifrost, the Rainbow Bridge, and he cursed Bifrost and longed to see the day when the armies of Muspelheim would break it down in their rush against Asgard. East of Midgard, there was a place more evil than any region of Jotunheim. It was Jarnvid, the Ironwood. There dealt witches who were the most foul of all witches, and they had a queen over them, a hag, a mother of many sons, who took upon themselves the shapes of wolves. Two of her sons were Skull and Hati, who pursued Sol, the sun, and Mani, the moon. She had a third son, who was Manigarm, the wolf, who was to be filled with the life blood of men, who was to swallow up the moon and stain the heavens and the earth with blood. To Jarnvid, the Ironwood, Loki made his way, and he wed one of the witches there, Angerboda, and they had children who took on dread shapes. Loki's offspring were the most terrible of the foes that were to come against the Aesir and the Vanir in the time that was called the Twilight of the Gods. The Valkyrie. Against the time when the riders of Muspelheim and the giants and the evil powers of the underworld would bring on battle, Odin, All-Father, was preparing a host of defenders for Asgard. They were not of the Aesir, nor of the Vanir. They were of the race of mortal men, heroes chosen from amongst the slain on fields of battle in Midgard. To choose the heroes and to give victory to those whom he willed to have victory, Odin had battle maidens that went to the fields of war. Beautiful were those battle maidens, and fearless. Wise were they also, for to them Odin showed the runes of wisdom. Valkyries, choosers of the slain, they were named. Those who were chosen on the fields of the slain were called in Asgard the Einhilhar. For them Odin made already a great hall. Valhalla, the hall of the slain, it was called. 540 doors had Valhalla, and out of each door 800 champions might pass. Every day champions put on their armour and took their weapons down from the walls, and went forth and battled with each other. All who were wounded were made whole again, and in peace and goodly fellowship they sat down to the feast that Odin prepared for them. Odin himself sat with his champions, drinking wine but eating no meat. For meat, the champions ate the flesh of the boar, Sharaliminya. Every day the boar was killed and cooked, and every morning it was whole again. For drink they had the mead that was made from the milk of the goat Hedron, the goat that browsed on the leaves of the tree Leardir, and the Valkyries, the wise and the fearless battle maidens, went amongst them, filling up their drinking horns with the heady mead. Youngest of all the battle maidens was Brynhild. Nevertheless, to her, Odin Allfather had shown more of the runes of wisdom than he had shown to any of her sisters. And when the time came for Brynhild to journey down into Midgard, he gave her a swan feather dress, such as he had given before to the 3 Valkyrie sisters, Alvit, Olrun, and Hildgrun. In the dazzling plumage of a swan, the young battle maiden flew down from Asgard. Not yet had she to go to the battlefields. Waters drew her, and as she waited on the will of the Allfather, she sought out a lake that had golden sands for its shore, and as a maiden bathed in it. Now there dwelt near this lake a young hero. His name was Agnar, and one day as Agnar lay by the lake, he saw a swan with a dazzling plumage fly down to it. And while she was in the reeds, the swan feather dress slipped off her, and Agnar beheld the swan change to a maiden. So bright was her hair, so strong and swift were all her movements, that he knew her for one of Odin's battle maidens, for one of those who give victory and choose the slain. Very daring was Agnar, and he set his mind upon capturing this battle maiden, even though he should bring on himself the wrath of Odin by doing it. He hid the swan feather dress that she had left in the reeds. When she came out of the water, she might not fly again. Agnar gave back to her the swan feather dress, but she had to promise that she would be his battle maiden. And as they talked together, the young Valkyrie saw in him a hero that one from Asgard might help. Very brave and very noble was Agnar. Brynhild went with him as his battle maiden, and she told him much from the runes of wisdom that she knew, and she showed him that Allfather's lost hope was in the bravery of the heroes of the earth. With the chosen from the slain for his champions, he would make battle in defense of Asgard. Always Brynhild was with Agnar's battalions. Above the battles she hovered, her bright hair and flashing battle dress outshining the spears and swords and shields of the warriors. But the grey-beard king Helgunnar made war on the young Agnar. Odin favoured the grey-beard king, and to him he promised the victory. Brynhild knew the will of the Allfather, but to Agnar, not to Helgunnar, she gave the victory. Doomed was Brynhild on the instant she went against Odin's will. Never again might she come into Asgard. A mortal woman she was now, and the Norns began to spin the thread of her mortal destiny. Sorrowful was Odin Allfather that the wisest of the battle maidens might never appear in Asgard, nor walk by the benches at the feasts of his champions in Valhalla. He rode down on Sleipnir to where Brynhild was, and when he came before her, it was his, and not her head, that was bowed down, for she knew now that the world of men was paying a bitter price for the strength that Asgard would have in the last battle. The bravest and noblest were taken from Midgard to fill up the ranks of Odin's champions, and Brynhild's heart was full of anger against the rulers of Asgard, and she cared no more to be of them. Odin looked on his unflinching battle maiden, and he said, "Is there aught thou wouldst have me bestow on thee in thy mortal life, Brynhilda?" "Naught save this," Brynhilda answered, "that in my mortal life no one but a man without fear, the bravest hero in the world, may claim me for wife." Allfather bowed his head and thought. "It should be as thou hast asked," he said. "Only he who is without fear shall come near thee." Then on the top of the mountain that is called Hindfell, he had a hall built that faced the south. 10 dwarfs built it of black stone, and when the hall was built, he put round it a wall of mounting and circling fire. More did Odin Allfather. He took a thorn of the tree of sleep and put it into the flesh of the battle maiden. Then, with her helmet on her head and the breast mail of the Valkyrie upon her, he lifted Brynhilda in his arms and carried her through the wall of mountain and encircling fire. He laid her upon the couch that was within the hall. There she would lie in slumber until the hero who was without fear should ride through the flame and awaken her to the life of a mortal woman. He took farewell of her, and he rode back to Asgard on Sleipnir. He might not foresee what fate would be hers as a mortal woman, but the fire he had left went mountain and circling around the hall that the dwarfs had built. For ages, that fire would be a fence around where Brynhilda, once a Valkyrie, lay in sleep.